The Grand Oak Hotel had always been a place of grandeur, with its ornate lobby and crystal chandeliers whispering tales of opulence. But beneath its polished surface there were secrets, dark and unsettling. It was the kind of place where stories began. Stories that guests whispered about, but few believed. It was a stormy night when Sarah, a travel writer, arrived at the Grand Oak. She had chosen this hotel for its old-world charm and its reputation for historical stories. The rain battered the windows of her cab as she checked in, and the thunder rumbled in the distance. The clerk handed her a brass key with a number stamped into it, 313. "Enjoy your stay," the clerk said with a forced smile. "If you need anything, just call." Sarah nodded and took the key, making her way to the elevator. As the doors closed behind her, she glanced at the old-fashioned numbers, noting how they flickered erratically. The elevator shuddered to a stop on the 3rd floor, and Sarah stepped out, her footsteps echoing in the dimly lit hallway. Room 313 was at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. Sarah pushed it open, and a rush of cold air greeted her. The room was tastefully decorated in Victorian style, with dark wood furnishings and rich fabrics. But as she placed her bags on the floor, she felt an odd sense of unease, a creeping chill that had nothing to do with the storm outside. She shrugged off the feeling, reminding herself that it was just the old building settling. After unpacking, she decided to explore the hotel a bit before settling in for the night. The hallways seemed to stretch endlessly, and she noted how the shadows seemed to shift and dance in the flickering light of the sconces. Returning to her room later, she found the door closed. She unlocked it and stepped inside. But something was off. The air was colder, and the lamp by the bed was flickering. She shrugged it off again, attributing it to the storm and the age of the building. That night, as Sarah tried to sleep, the storm outside intensified. The wind howled, rattling the windows, and the thunder seemed to shake the very walls. Just as she was drifting off, she heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible whispering. Sarah sat up in bed, her heart racing. She listened intently, but the whispers were gone. She lay back down, trying to convince herself it was just the wind. But sleep eluded her. The whispers returned, louder this time, and seemed to come from the bathroom. Gathering her courage, Sarah got out of bed and walked to the bathroom. The light inside flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. The whispering was clearer now, a series of disjointed phrases that made no sense. Suddenly, the bathroom door slammed shut behind her. Sarah spun around, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She tried to open the door, but it was stuck. Panic surged through her as she pounded on the door, calling for help. "Help! Someone, please!" But the only response was the sound of her own voice echoing back at her. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, until it was almost a scream. Sarah felt a cold hand touch her shoulder, and she whirled around, but there was no one there. In a burst of adrenaline, she managed to force the door open and stumbled back into the room. She looked around wildly, but everything seemed as it had before. The whispers had stopped, leaving only the howling wind and the pounding rain. Shaken, Sarah decided to leave the hotel. She grabbed her bags and went to the front desk, but the clerk was nowhere to be found. The lobby was empty, the chandeliers casting eerie shadows in the dim light. She tried to call a cab, but the phone lines were down. Desperate, she went back to her room to wait for daylight. She sat in the corner of the room, clutching her phone and trying to calm her racing heart. The whispers had returned, this time accompanied by the sound of footsteps in the hall. As dawn broke, Sarah saw the clerk finally return to the desk. She approached him, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. "What happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. I heard whispers and the door to the bathroom. The clerk's expression darkened. Room 313 has a history, he said quietly. Many years ago, a woman was found dead in that room. Some say her spirit lingers, trapped between worlds. I should have warned you. Sarah's heart sank. She had encountered something far beyond her understanding. She left the hotel as soon as she could, the memory of room 313 haunting her dreams and her waking hours. Jason was a businessman who had been traveling for work, and he was grateful to find a room at the Grand Oak Hotel, especially given the stormy weather. He had chosen the hotel on a whim, drawn by its old-world charm and its apparent luxury. As he checked in, the clerk handed him a key for room 515, a room on the 5th floor. "Have a pleasant stay," the clerk said with a faint smile. "If you need anything, just let us know." Jason nodded and took the key, making his way to the elevator. The ride up was smooth, and he soon found himself standing in front of room 515. The hallway was dimly lit, with shadows playing tricks on his eyes. He unlocked the door and entered, immediately noticing the room's grandeur. It was a luxurious suite, with antique furnishings and a grand view of the stormy cityscape below. After unpacking, Jason decided to take a shower and relax. The rain pounded on the windows, creating a soothing rhythm that helped him unwind. As he stepped out of the bathroom, he noticed a strange chill in the air. He shrugged it off, attributing it to the storm and the old building's quirks. He settled into the plush armchair by the window, his mind drifting as he watched the rain. That's when he heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping coming from the window. He turned, but the tapping stopped. He dismissed it as the storm, returning his attention to the view. But the tapping continued, louder this time. It was as if someone was tapping on the glass, trying to get his attention. Jason stood up and walked to the window, but there was nothing outside, just the relentless rain and darkness. He returned to the armchair, but the tapping didn't stop. It grew more insistent, and Jason's unease grew with it. He walked to the door and opened it, hoping to find the source of the noise, but the hallway was empty. The tapping continued, now accompanied by a faint, mournful wail. Jason's anxiety escalated. He tried calling the front desk, but there was no answer. The storm seemed to intensify, and the wailing grew louder, echoing through the room. He felt a cold breeze on his neck and turned to see a shadowy figure standing by the window. The figure was indistinct, its features obscured by the storm and darkness. It seemed to be reaching out to him, its form wavering like a mirage. Jason's heart raced, and he stumbled back, unable to tear his eyes away. The figure began to move towards him, its wail growing louder. Jason backed away, his mind racing. He grabbed his phone and took a picture, but the figure vanished as soon as the flash went off. The wailing stopped abruptly, leaving only the sound of the storm. Jason decided he had had enough. He packed his bags quickly and made his way to the elevator. As he descended, he noticed a plaque in the lobby commemorating a tragic event, the death of a young woman who had fallen from the hotel's window. Her spirit said to haunt room 515. Shaken, Jason left the Grand Oak Hotel behind, the memory of the ghostly figure and the mournful wail lingering in his mind. He never returned to that room or the hotel, haunted by the encounter and the chilling history of room 515. Emily, a young college student, was staying at the Grand Oak Hotel during a weekend trip with friends. She was excited about the adventure, but had a nagging feeling about the old hotel. When she arrived, the atmosphere was even more eerie than she had anticipated. The hotel was grand, but had an unsettling aura, its ornate decor and long, shadowy hallways giving it a ghostly charm. She checked into room 701, a suite, on the 7th floor. The room was large and elegantly furnished, but Emily's eyes were drawn to an antique mirror mounted on the wall. It was an old-fashioned piece with an ornate frame, and despite its beauty, it gave her an uneasy feeling. After her friends left to explore the city, Emily decided to relax in her room. The rain had started again, drumming softly against the windows. She sat on the bed and tried to shake off the feeling of discomfort, but the mirror seemed to beckon to her. Curiosity got the better of her, and she approached the mirror. As she looked into it, she felt a shiver run down her spine. The reflection seemed to distort, the edges of the mirror warping in a way that made her feel uneasy. She saw movement in the reflection, a shadow that wasn't hers, shifting and dancing behind her. Emily turned around quickly, but there was nothing there. The room was empty, and the only sound was the rain tapping against the window. She looked back at the mirror, and the shadow was gone. She shook her head, trying to rationalize it as a trick of the light. Later that night, as Emily prepared for bed, she noticed something strange. The mirror seemed to be fogged up, even though the room was cool and dry. Written on the fogged glass was a message. "Help me." Emily's heart raced, and she wiped the mirror clean, but the message remained. She felt a cold breath on her neck and spun around, but the room was still empty. The mirror's reflection showed nothing but her own frightened face. Desperate, Emily tried to call her friends, but the phone line was down. The storm outside grew louder, and the mirror seemed to pulse with an ominous energy. She could hear a faint, desperate whisper coming from the mirror, pleading for help. Emily couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed her belongings and fled the room, her heart pounding. She ran down the stairs, the storm raging outside, as she made her way to the front desk. She found the clerk, who looked at her with a mixture of concern and understanding. "Something's wrong with room 701, Emily said, her voice trembling. "The mirror. It's haunted." The clerk nodded solemnly. "Room 701 has a history. The mirror belonged to a woman who died in that room. Her spirit is said to be trapped, reaching out for help." Emily left the hotel in a hurry, the chilling encounter with the haunted mirror haunting her thoughts. She never returned to room 701 or the Grand Oak Hotel, forever marked by the eerie reflection and the desperate message that had appeared on the glass.